Okay. All right. So first off, which branch are you in?
I'm in the Navy.
What do you do in the Navy?
I'm a computer networking technician.
Oof. Is that the MOS you wanted?
Initially, I wanted to be a nuke, but I was too old for that, so I applied with an age waiver, and it was declined. So it was something that was still technical and would apply well outside.
What's a nuke?
They manage the nuclear reactors on the carriers and on submarines.
Okay. So one of the nuclear engineer kind of guys.
hmm
I got a friend of mine who does that. All right. So why did you want to do that?
Um, I've always found nuclear technology kind of fascinating. So I don't know the exact like draw towards it, but um, I just found that quite interesting, and I thought it'd apply well outside as well.
So you were sort of looking ahead as to how this would be useful down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I'd considered it a few years back, and then I revisited the military after I got married. So at that point, I joined for stability, and at that point, I was especially looking for what would provide opportunities, like both within and outside of the military.
Okay. Did you ever want to do something else?
Yeah, initially I was in school for biology,
Mm-hmm.
so I have a degree in fisheries biology. So I was interested in aquaculture, fish farming, because
Oh,
I
cool.
I grew up on a fish farm, and it just kind of occurred, I guess, like organically. And then I was going to grad school um, for reproductive biology, and then life happened, and I ended up not finishing. So I was looking at, because I wasn't interested in repursuing that, just pursuing something else. And um, again, just it changed for me a lot when I got married because I wanted to provide that stability, and I couldn't put my life on so many hypothetical what ifs because I needed like guaranteed income, guaranteed place to live and all that.
Yeah. Sounds very, very pragmatic of you.
Mhm.
Um, what would you have liked to have done if not for life getting in the way?
Well, things have changed for me a lot. So I didn't used to be so interested in um, like psychology and philosophy and stuff like that. I always had some intrigue towards it,
Mm-hmm.
but I got a lot more interested in that, probably in the last 3, 4 years. And so, if it ever made sense for me to pursue that path, then maybe I would. But again, it's like balancing that versus something pragmatic is is important.
So far, it sounds like you tend to really try to think things through on what's going to be useful for you.
Not always. I mean, not previously in my life, but yeah, in the past 3 years, I'd say.
So it's kind of a recent thing to start thinking
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. I like to think that before I was kind of failing upwards in life. So, and then I started failing downwards. So then, yeah.
Boy, I know that feeling. Like I'm right here with you. uh, so how are you failing upwards?
Just I didn't really kind of know where I was going. I would just like kind of build good rapport with like instructors, and they would recommend me for things, and I would just kind of at people's suggestion, just kind of kept doing things, and then it kind of started working for me, and then things started to fall apart, I guess, and then it it caused me to like really reconsider like what I'm doing, like be much more like thoughtful and mindful of the decisions I was making and like why I was making them.
Can you give an example?
So like when I was in grad school, I was, there's a lot of times where I was just there and I'm like, I don't even understand how I was there. It's just like it just seemed like a string of events, and I just happened to be there, and it just, you know, um, you've heard of imposter syndrome,
Yep.
so just like extreme imposter syndrome, and And
Okay.
so that, yeah.
Uh, all right. So just to get kind of a timeline here. So all the way till grad school, and you still were like in this imposter syndrome kind of approach. This just sort of bouncing around based on people kind of giving you some guidance, and you were like, "Yeah, why not?" And then
Mhm.
you found yourself there. So how old are you now?
I'm 29.
Okay, wow. How long ago were you in grad school? How,
Started when I was maybe 24, so that was a few years ago.
man, you got
I,
there
I,
pretty quick.
yeah, so I attended for a little less than 2 years.
Did you finish?
No.
How come?
Well, a big part of it was I was in a relationship that really wasn't good for me, so I just kind of mentally fell apart, and like mentally and emotionally, I didn't know how to handle it. So I had to withdraw for some time, really kind of rethink life. And then in that time, I met my wife, and things started to stabilize. We are still kind of not super well founded, like financially, or like we're kind of living day to day. And then so I made the decision to join the military because it was what was good for us, good for our future. So, but it was, yeah, it was, I didn't really understand why I was doing what I was doing. I was kind of struggling. I was a little bit too scattered at the time. I've
Hmm.
definitely like become a lot more focused, but at the time I was kind of scattered, and I'd kind of struggle to kind of carry out my studies and my research. And then yeah, just it wasn't a good fit for me at that point in my life. Like if I pursued something like that now, maybe it'd be different, but at that point in my life, not so much.
So what were you struggling on when you were going through school?
Um,
Like, was it academics? Was it like staying disciplined? Were you sitting there and you're just like, I don't feel like I know anything?
no, I had ability to like learn things, but it would be like if you gave me an assignment, I wouldn't just try and like figure out the most effective way to do the assignment and then just carry it out to completion and say it's good enough. I would have this kind of weird desire to continue to learn more about it. And like I'd push everything right to the deadline. Sometimes I'd submit stuff half finished. And I kept trying to rework my my projects over and over. So it was kind of like I couldn't really like kind of just make a plan, set it in stone, and then just work on that plan and carry it out. Because as I was carrying out the plan, I was making changes, and then by doing that, I just kept undermining the ability to actually finish anything.
Mm. So you kept trying to like learn new stuff about it. Like, what were you trying to learn? The background, like the deeper, how should I say, the deeper structure of it, or what? Just random details? Like what?
Kind of both. So like if this was in biology, so there's always more to understand. So like this molecule interacts with this molecule and it has this sort of effect or something like that. And I would want to understand why on a deeper level. So I kept kind of honing in, and then from there it would spring new ideas that I could take from there. And then additionally, one thing I would do is I try and find the most efficient way to do things, but then I was trying to become efficient at becoming efficient, and what that resulted in is never really like having a system I could just implement. Like I actually lost the efficiency completely. So I get yeah, I just kept reworking my methods and also my understandings. And because I never was able to set anything like in place, then I wasn't able to operate. And I'd say that actually has improved a lot in the military because a lot of times my instructors they don't really know. So they're just saying you don't need to know that. And at first that would bother me and I'd ask a lot of questions, but now I go, okay, I don't need to know that. Maybe I'll
Mm,
figure it out later. But I'm a lot better about just kind of getting something done because there's a reason to get it done.
okay. So you perfectly went into something I was going to ask. Like, how were you when you transitioned into the military, which is, as you point out, a very different structure. It's very much this is it. This is all you need to know. It's idiot proof. You know,
Yeah.
it's military proof. So this is all you got to do. But it sounds like having a little bit of that again, that guidance, that structure is helpful to you.
Mhm.
Having someone kind of let you know, like, listen, this is all you really need. Trust me, you'll be fine. And that's actually beneficial for you.
I think so. I think at some point, as I, continue to mature, I'd feel, quite a bit more comfortable getting out and like maintaining some level of like discipline in my life.
Mhm.
Um, but like for now, it's pretty easy. You just show up and do what they say and do it well. And if you keep doing that, then you look good to your superiors and you promote and all that. So it's quite simple.
Yeah, I find that kind of relatable myself. Um, what about earlier in life, like when you were in high school and middle school and stuff like that? How were you then?
Like with classwork,
Yeah.
mm, I liked learning a lot, but I never really attached the value to my grades. I got good enough grades. It's like on average, like a 3.2 student, maybe.
Mhm.
So I did good enough, but I wasn't like a neurotic student. I wasn't really studying much. I just asked a lot of questions. I've always been known as the person that just asks a lot of questions. So
What
um,
kind of questions were you asking? Like,
a lot of times it's clarifying questions. So I could see how something could be interpreted in two different ways. So I'm trying to make sure that I understand it correctly. Or like the way I see it is if I have like there's a piece of information. So like I understand this and I understand this, but there's this missing chunk here. I'm going to ask so that I can understand that. Or I can understand that they just taught me A and they just taught me B. So this must be C. So I'd ask a question. I'd constantly hear, that's coming up next, or I'm about to get to that. So, um,
okay.
and when I was younger, I used to dominate classes a lot more because I'd ask so many questions. And then now I'm a lot better about trying to look at the environment. And I've also been in a capacity of teaching. So I kind of understand instructors a little bit better. So trying to assist my fellow classmates or peers to like improve, their own academic success or their own learning.
Do you really enjoy doing that a lot, like teaching and so on, helping others?
I do. I mean, I could see like if it was overly structured, like teaching in a military capacity might not be the most enriching, but um, when I was um, a grad student, I would teach like essentially discussion courses and stuff like that, and that was pretty fulfilling. I probably wasn't a great TA, but which is a teacher's assistant, or
Yeah, yeah.
I probably wasn't a great TA, but I was, I could see how that could be enriching if I continue to get better at that. So
Why, why discussions, and why didn't you think you were a good TA?
no, I don't know if I was because I would if I didn't understand the material perfectly, like I'm trying to figure it out as I'm teaching it sometimes. So
Mhm.
um, and a lot of times students are a lot more focused, so this is what I need to know to pass the test, so don't teach me anything else. And so I would try and put everything into context, provide examples, um, implications, and I like discussions because I liked fostering the discussion. I like the kind of active engagement from everyone. So in an environment where it's just you're receiving death by PowerPoint and people are there because it's mandatory. It kind of sucks, but if it can become a fun environment for everyone to learn, then that's ideal.
Are you good at creating fun environments?
No, um, maybe a little bit, but I'm not the life of the party. But I can throw in little like things here and there, but um, yeah, I've kind of accepted that that's not really my role, and usually somebody else that's younger and has more energy is willing to fulfill that role. So a lot of times I'm
Mm.
looking out for people just because um, I just see there's a pretty big maturity dynamic between people, and I've realized that people don't really look at the long-term implications of their actions. So if I like continue to do this behavior, I'm going to condition myself to continue to do this behavior, and then it's going to bite me. So a lot of times it's like I'm cautioning people about what could go wrong. But and trying to keep it fun. I don't want to patronize anyone, but
Hmm.
or condescend to anyone. But
And you'd say you're pretty good at seeing what could go wrong.
yes, yeah, I'm pretty vigilant of what could go wrong a lot of the times. Like probably even more so. I tend to err on the side of um, things can like X, Y, and Z could go wrong, and only X goes wrong. But at least I was prepared. So I'm preparing for um, kind of like worst case scenarios. And then if it doesn't, I'm relieved. Or if something good happens, then I'm particularly relieved. So I'm not accounting on anyone's like goodwill or the stars aligning or everything working out for things to go right. So
Mm.
it's just I think that's more of a facet of like life having slapped me around a little bit. So because that's occurred, I'm now more aware. So it's it's not like I always expect things to go wrong, but I realize how they can. So and
All right. How are you with what are some like hobbies and things you've been interested in?
mm, well, in the past, like the sports that I stuck around with the longest were wrestling and soccer. I've always liked just learning. That's probably like the constant thing throughout the course of my life has just been learning. Less, it's kind of changed in flavor in the past few years because I've gotten a little bit more introspective. So as opposed to like looking outside for external resources of information, like once you've lived up to a certain period of your life, you have so much like data to work with. So now it's just trying to kind of understand what's already there
Hmm.
and trying to understand how I operate in the world. So I see I see people like systems, and so we have different like programming and conditions within us, and so there's like we're all operating within like the greater system, which is everything existence as far as we know, and other people, which are their own systems. And I'm trying. It's like I'm aware of my system and trying to understand why it's doing what it's doing. But as far as hobbies, I like spending time with my wife and with my dog. Lately, my friend gave me his Xbox One. Before that, all I had was like a PS2,
Whew.
and
Wow.
so, um, I've been playing. A lot of times, I'm doing what I think a lot of people do, which is I'm just kind of like biding time in life. But like I find a lot of fulfillment in engaging with my wife and my dogs, and just kind of having like kind of a happy home environment, like a comfortable home environment.
Okay, and that's important to you having a comfortable home environment.
Yeah, I mean, like life is full of competition and difficulties and stuff, but it doesn't need to be like that all the time. And I
Uh-huh.
think I think at home that's where we can kind of relax and just kind of enjoy each other's company. And it doesn't, she's a little more um, willing to go out into the world and do stuff, and sometimes take me along. And so like when we're at home, and like it's just nice because we can just kind of relax and enjoy each other. Like we're married, but we're also best friends. So that's who I kind of want to laze around and spend my time with and be comfortable with. So
Okay. So, since bringing up the wife, how would you say you've been when it comes to relationships, specifically romantic relationships?
in the past, serial monogamist, I guess. Like I had two major relationships prior to meeting my wife,
Hmm.
and those both lasted a few years. So I want to build stability, and largely because I was unaware, like I couldn't I couldn't like foresee some of the issues or fix some of the issues. Um, one relationship, I don't want to be particularly like spiteful or hard on this person, but they grew up in a kind of difficult home, and I grew up in a kind of good home, so like I wasn't super aware of like a lot of like manipulative tactics and stuff. So that girl wrapped me around her finger. And but the one before that was like pretty stable. I would just say that I was drawn to trying to find a person and build stability. And um, I was just drawn to like, this is my person, I'm their person, and we don't need to like go looking outside, or we don't need to, I'm basically just replicating what I grew up with. My parents have been married for, close to 30 years.
Whew. Congratulations to them.
Mhm.
Right. So would you say that you're good or comfortable at, um, let's say, judging or interacting with people? Like you kind of get a sense of who they are and how compatible they are with you?
Now, yes. I mean, yeah, but before there was, it's weird because you go through your entire life and you might think that you're aware, but then something happens and then you realize like you really didn't know anything. So now I guess I'm more aware than I'm unaware, but in that I've found more things to be aware of. So like how people are interacting with me, why they might be interacting with me this way, how this might rub me the wrong way. So I'm much more likely now to kind of see something and immediately kind of suss it out, whereas before I might not have.
Hmm. Okay. What about dealing with people on, I guess, less personal level, but just socially? You're just being part of the atmosphere, being able to kind of interact with the environment. Um, you mentioned before that you don't really consider yourself the life of the party, but it sounds like you're not bad with crowds and people and socializing and so on.
It's kind of interesting because people are contradictory, and I'm not an exception to that. So I can be at times like very goofy and whimsical, but usually when I'm very comfortable. So with my wife, I can be quite goofy, but then I can shift into being very, very serious, and usually that has to do with uh, just like if I feel like nobody else has a handle on what's going on, or I feel like something could go wrong or something, then I'm probably going to tend towards more serious. So um, can you repeat the question briefly?
Yeah, just wondering, like, so another way is, how about this one? Just keep it real simple. Like, do you have a lot of friends?
Uh, Sort of. Um, I'm not great at maintaining friendships. So like there's people, if I saw them, I talk to them, but even some people I've gotten really close to over the years, while I was in proximity to them, then I don't talk to them very much after, and it's nothing to do with them. I'm just not great at maintaining friendships. So but I want to like, while I have interactions with people, for it to be um, good and meaningful and benefit both people. So hopefully, like if everyone has an interaction with somebody else or with other people,
Hmm.
they leave positive, eff- you know, effects on those people for their lives, and then hopefully they also have positive that for my life. So
Okay. Do you have a lot of, do you sort of like engage with them, then maybe some time passes and then you kind of like re-engage with them again? Is it something like that, or they just kind of fade away?
they kind of, I mean, I don't forget them, but they do kind of fade away in terms of like I don't continue to reach out, and I don't fault them for not reaching out because I'm kind of a recluse. So
Hmm.
that's it's fine, and if they ever did reach out, we could talk. But I'm just not great at the maintenance aspect, and I don't feel a particular urge to um, hang out in group settings because I don't know, it's like complicated. There's a lot of moving parts going on in a group, and I'm always analyzing what's going on. So it's like I'm breaking everything down, and sometimes it can almost be a bit overwhelming. And I've realized I tend to be quite a bit more conservative, at least than a lot of my peers in the military. And like so at times it can be overly vulgar, and I can tend to just kind of shut down. So I don't always tend towards group settings, and there's a part of me that does feel a little bit like I'm missing out, but it's not. I don't think it's nearly as much as a lot of other people's. So I'm not as drawn to groups as other people might be. But when there's a great group environment and I'm enjoying it, it's great. But
Mm. So sounds like a little bit of a just. I'm curious. Is it a certain amount of like anxiety or something else going on that you don't enjoy being in certain settings? Like you mentioned the vulgarity, or maybe being too much, or people being immature.
yeah,
Or is it just like a lack of interest? You're just there and you're like, you know what? It's just not my scene. I just don't really like doing any of those things. I don't feel like being there.
I don't think so because when people are talking, I'm listening. So I I'm gonna pick up on conversations, and then a part of me wants to jump in and say something. And I used to not have the social tact to not do that, so I would just kind of jump into other people's conversations and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'll listen and I have something to say, and then I'll make a decision to just not say something. And so I'm engaged when other people are there, but I don't think it's about an indifference. I think it's more of a withdrawal.
Okay. All right. So, what are some things you'd say you're good at?
Hmm. I don't know how to answer that. I'm good at just like I don't view it as a skill particularly, but like compared to other people, I tend to be quite analytical. I ask a lot of questions. I want to make sure I understand something, and that over the course of my life has led to me um, like coming up with different ideas and different capacity to understand things than perhaps my peers. And so I would say that um, one thing is like I tend to have like an outside observer's kind of perspective. So if people a lot of times they don't realize in their language that they're, for example, they're applying connotations to their words constantly. So this is a good word, this is a bad word. If somebody says this word, it means something bad. And just what I tend to do is I strip the connotation away from the words to just try and understand what does this word mean, and is there some other different way that we could apply this. So I guess I'm good at reinterpreting things, but in the past, like I'm not super as far as like more conventional skills. Like I'm not super physically inclined. Like I don't have great reaction time or anything,
Mm-hmm.
but I could be quite creative. So when I used to wrestle, I would be quite creative in the way I'd apply my skills. And yeah, it's kind of hard for me to answer.
What if we reverse the question? Do you know what you're bad at?
Yes, I'm bad at like kind of following, like I view it as like nonsense social conventions. Like I just can't fake it. So there's a lot of like nonsense that people do in their day to day, and they do it just because that's what they've learned, and we're a social species and we want to fit in. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't fault them for that. I'm just not good at myself personally doing that as well. So um, I might come off to some people as a little bit more robotic, or um, a little bit like off. In the past, maybe is more eccentric,
Mm-hmm.
but um, yeah, I'm not great at that. And like historically, I wasn't great at picking up on some social cues that other people were. So and I've gotten a lot better about that. But
Hmm.
I also wasn't great at hand-eye coordination, so terrible at sports like baseball and football. And I'm kind of a scaredy cat, so I wasn't trying to get hit. I did wrestling 'cause I didn't want to get punched in the face. I love following like MMA
Uh-huh.
and fighting, but I'll let them do their thing. I'll watch,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, like things that require like like a form of like physical fearlessness, like not the best at. I mean, I could do it, but I need my reasons. It's very very bad at kind of detaching and just doing it. So things that require a level of like mental detachment, but good at things that require emotional detachment.
Okay. Do you generally know how you feel about certain things or people?
When I think about like the thoughts that are coming to my head or the things that I say, or it just like I analyze anyone else. It's a very third person kind of perspective. So it's like I'm watching myself like I'm watching anyone else, and like, oh, that person's mad because they said this, this, and this. So um, yeah, I would say it's just a, whereas most people they're kind of in the it feels like they're more like in the driver's seat of experiencing their own emotions,
Hmm.
and then they know how they feel. Like for me, I have to kind of analyze it, and I have my own theories about feelings and emotions and what they mean, and I'm not great at just saying this is that. I have to look at it first. So usually I have to, something happens, and then I analyze it. So
Okay. So it's what's interesting to me, already. There was a while ago where I kind of was feeling more comfortable on where your type was, and then you totally just blew that up after a while there. I was like, oh, okay, now we're going all over the place, which is also interesting to me. So a couple of things I was thinking about was delta quadra. It's particularly the extroverted deltas, and I was actually leaning more towards an IEE or an LSE for a little while there, and then things kind of veered in different directions.
mhm.
So I'm curious. First, what do you know of socionics, and what were you thinking of yourself?
So I've been trying to type myself now for a few years through different systems,
Hmm.
through Socionics, probably the past 6 months. I've gotten more into it. Like I'd kind of run across it before, but I didn't really kind of commit to understanding it. And
Okay.
so then I've read most of the information on Wikisocion at this point, and so like that's kind of my primary. I find it can be really hard to type, whereas, and that's kind of why I was drawn to your channel and talking to you, is because you seem more definitive. You don't get too bogged down in perspectives. You kind of apply the definition and run with it. So for me, I'm saying where, from this perspective, this definition could mean this thing, and from this perspective, this definition could mean another thing. So I've struggled immensely, and I I would imagine that I'm some sort of intuitive thinking type.
Yeah, and some of that seems to be coming through a little bit. So one thing that you just mentioned there, right? That ability to sort of just see the thing, be very decisive on this is what it means. That's it. That's more of a TI thing, and the TI types you see can do that a lot more, especially when you listen to an SLE, the ESTPs. They can really be. It's this. It's that. It's the end of it, right? It's
Mhm.
very much following a definition. For types that are likely to be very low on TI or they don't value TI, they're more likely to maybe understand the definitions and how the pieces come together, but they don't settle with it. They're like, I don't know. What about this? What about that?
Mhm.
Right? Something you seem to be doing a lot is you're mentioning these different possibilities. What about this? What about that? What about this thing? Did we look at that? Let me ask a lot of questions. I ask a lot of questions all the time. What about this? Did we look at this piece? Oh, look, I found something else interesting. I want to look at that a little bit deeper. So I was hearing a lot of that, which made me feel like IEE might be something going on here, right? A lot of this NE bouncing around kind of stuff going on. You mentioned before the imposter syndrome, which suggests to me that maybe the TE stuff is a bit lower as well. It's in a more fragile place, possibly in a mobilized or inferior position. Let me know if any of this makes sense to you so far.
I'd like to add something too. So
Mm-hmm.
when I was going through that I didn't experience it as like, oh, I don't feel like I belong, or I wasn't maybe some part of me. I
Hmm.
I now I can look back and see that that was like a lot of my acting out and stuff was, a lot of it was very much self-sabotage. And um to add to the perspectives thing, it's kind of like I see people as more complex than just a single being. There's a single output from every person at any one time. We're saying one thing,
Hmm.
but inside we're more of like a collective. So there's where I'm seeing this perspectives, it's kind of like shifting around to kind of see what this part of me thinks about it, so it's kind of like there's different like like subsystems or voices, and those are going to all have their own kind of input to a situation, and then you could say that they're kind of working together or against each other to
Hmm.
generate some sort of output, you know, from like the whole. So, and then that's where a lot of that third person perspective comes from, is because in order to not just exist as one of those, there's a stepping back to kind of see what's kind of going on along the whole system. So,
Yeah, again, it's still searching for possibilities,
mhm,
looking at things from different angles and directions. That's what that sounds like to me.
mhm.
So I'm looking at that and it's like I'm hearing like there's a lot of NE in there. Meanwhile, when it comes to more NI, like knowing the direction you want to go, this is where I fit, this is the path before me and so on, didn't seem to really have that. You mentioned before kind of bouncing around, like I came here, I went there, certain people kind of pushed me in this direction or that direction. It was like, okay, kind of going with the flow of things rather than having a set path.
So another contradiction is like between agreeableness and disagreeableness. So if I disagree with somebody, I'll try and understand where they're coming from, but I kind of will try and believe anybody with what they're saying, and I might disagree with it and then come with it. But like on the first pass, it's like, okay, let's treat this as true. And I'm constantly doing that with information. So, and when I come back and I start asking people questions, it can be viewed as very much disagreeable. But I would say a big part of my decision making process and like how I carry myself day to day is just how to be considerate to other people. And that's where I can actually run up against a group, is people can be really inconsiderate at times.
Mm.
So like I think that might be relevant for typing, is no, I'm not saying that some types are going to be considerate and other types are not, but everyone's capable of being that. But that's a huge part of my decision making process all the time, is how to not be a asshole, to people, and try and treat them right. Realize they're all just their own people. They're all are there the way they are because they've lived life, the way they have, and I'm the way that I've lived life because the way that I have. And how can we all kind of, be respectful of one another?
So that to me sounds like it's not you're not very harsh on your judgments of other people. You're very open-minded of other people, aware of their backgrounds, their personal stories, different things to consider as to why someone is the way that they are or behave the way that they do. It shows to me a certain open-mindedness.
Mm.
Would you agree?
Yes, I mean, I still can be harsh. And when I get really frustrated, I can kind of blow up a little bit.
Hmm.
And a lot of times it's kind of like an avoidance at that point. Like, this person, I can't deal with them. I'm just going to avoid them. Um, but yeah, I can be open minded to people. But if they show that they are arrogant, or that they're just by proxy better than other people, I start to really take issue with that. And so I'll usually try and, like, politely make it known to them that that's not really appropriate. And if it continues, or this just seems like a selfish, arrogant person, I'm going to avoid them. Like, I don't have a problem with people that don't know things, but people that are um, yeah, that are, I'm sure a lot of these types of people too, that are just really arrogant, and
Yeah.
I just don't want to deal with those people at all.
We call them officers.
So. You're an officer too, sir.
I know my species.
Okay.
I had to slip that one in there. I was like, it's low hanging fruit. I had to get it.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's still a certain flexibility on character judgments there. Would you say that you really I guess have there been times where you run into people that you really don't like them, you really judge their character to be a shitty human being or just worthless or whatever, and you just kind of close the door on that person mentally. You're just like, yeah, I'm done with that guy.
I think it'd be easier to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
But no, and sometimes I can come off very harsh initially, and then I soften the judgment because it's like I'm waiting for them to show me something else. Um, so there's there's times where yeah, I just won't speak to people for a period of time until their behavior kind of adjusts or something. And um, I'd like everyone to like can try and improve their conduct with other people. And so I'm willing to kind of stick around for it because I think that not you. I think it defeats the whole purpose of improving like kind of a societal conduct if you're willing to just shut people off. I think it makes you a hypocrite to say I'm this person can't improve, they're a bad person, because I don't think that there's good and bad people. There's people that do good and bad things. And then if you do a lot of bad things, people might say you're a bad person, but if you start doing good things, then you can start to be a good person. You're not. I don't think people are just born and they're just going to be a good or bad person for their whole life. So I think everyone's capable of that. So I don't want to be a hypocrite. So I'm not going to judge people so harshly as to say they can't improve their conduct. But of course, if something horrible happened, like somebody killed my dog or something, like hopefully that they live a better life. But I don't have to deal with them.
Okay, but that's still leaving the door open on people. You're not very. That's not a very settled, decided view on someone. The door is always left open that a person can change, they can be better, they can improve, they can make adjustments,
Mhm.
which is more of a delta quadra kind of thing rather than gamma, for example. Gammas tend to be harsher and more decided on people, usually, whereas delta tends to be much more flexible and open-minded towards people. So that's kind of where I was going with that. Um, so you mentioned the sport aspect. Is wrestling in there, soccer in there, sports, and then you mentioned you just like learning.
Mhm.
So what are the things that you're learning?
Well, growing up, I was really interested about um, like animals, biology.
Mm-hmm.
I watched like Animal Planet for hours, and so my mom would like come home with like whatever book she could find, and I'd just read that stuff a lot. And then um, I think it's not like always a concerted effort. Like I'm gonna gain mastery over this topic. It's not like a direct form of education. It's more of like I'm just gonna kind of interact with the information, and then I'm just gonna learn things by proxy. So almost kind of the way a kid would learn. And then that's where I think I would struggle in school too, is because the higher up you go, or the less time that you have, the more demands, the more it has to be like, okay, this is time to study and learn this material, because that's not the way that kids learn at all. They just kind of interact with information, they just pick it up. So I would just ask a lot of questions and pick things up, and just I don't know. I grew up out like in a pretty rural setting, so just a lot of time kind of outside interacting with my environment, and um, yeah.
Hmm. Are you picking up like new hobbies and things to do?
No, because I kind of see the pointlessness of it. Like it's it's not a real permanent thing, and that's something I've struggled with lately a lot. Is um, eh, most of the things that we pick up are just gonna it's not gonna be that important. Like it's just kind of a way to bide the time. It's like It's almost like a coping mechanism from existence. So like lately, I was going to the gym, and they have badminton, not is it badminton, racquetball courts there,
Hmm.
and so would get the equipment because I don't have my own equipment, so they would loan out the equipment. Otherwise, I'd definitely never get invested. And I was doing it, and it's fun, but it's not. I already know it's just I'm just kind of it's a way to stay active a little bit and bide my time. I don't have any um, delusions about how long that will continue to be in my life. So
Hmm.
like I can commit to I can commit to my wife, to my the people I'm closest to. So that's my parents, my wife, my dogs. But I'm not super committal to a hobby. I don't feel any need to tie my identity to any of those things either. So I'm not super identity oriented towards, I don't need a bragging right. I don't need to say I'm great at this thing. And like,
Yeah. Okay. And the same goes for like careers and jobs. You don't need that as part of your identity or anything.
you know,
You can kind of move on to any particular thing.
yeah, I mean, it's hard to uproot when once stable. So like I know that in a few years, let's say I decide to get out and do like some contracting job or like go for further education or something. That's going to be scary because I just had paychecks that were stable for a few years, and now that's going to stop. So the hesitation wouldn't be like the fear of um like losing my identity. The fear would be the loss of stability.
And that's an important thing for you, I guess, the stability of it.
Yeah, but it's and that really is because I grew up in a pretty stable home, and then I had a few years of really floundering and realizing that I was taking that completely for granted, and now it's I
Hmm.
have some responsibilities to the people around me, so now it's something that I'm constantly thinking about, like how could this go wrong? So
Hmm. Is is help keeping track of things, day to day things, um, especially in the personal life, especially like house stuff, bills, other things that need to get paid. Um, do you often feel like you need help with that kind of stuff, or do you appreciate help with that stuff?
yeah, absolutely. My wife,
Oh, you smiled on that one, so we hit on something.
so my it's kind of funny because when me and my wife met, I said I was looking for a manager, jokingly, which is it's a huge red flag. She should not have dated me, but she kind of is. I really admire her ability to kind of handle a lot of the household stuff,
Hmm.
um, and she's really a kind of a go getter. So she'll try her hand at this and this and this. Like she's much more willing to take some of those kind of risks. And I'm the one that's constantly telling her how things can go wrong, not to stop her, but I think it forms a healthy dynamic of I'm looking out for the risk, and she's looking at opportunities, and we kind of balance each other out. But like a lot of times I don't want to pay a bill. She'll just okay, I got it, and she'll pay the bill. So and I sometimes I just lose my mind over paperwork because it's like if you miss one like signature or something, then you have to go back to this person, but their office is closed, so call their attendant, and it's just this like I just take my paper, please. But
Now,
that
one of
my
the things I'm curious about is like it sounds like there's all this like anxiety, concern, issue about things possibly going wrong or something's gonna fall apart, and I'm just kind of curious where that's coming from.
I've just had things go badly for me, and I think people they have different aptitudes. So somebody that might happen to, and they might be totally unfazed by it.
Hmm.
And for me, I'm not that. So like when the bad things happen, it's like I was easily conditioned by the lesson to be more mindful and to like um, the thing that you're not looking at, the you're if you're not looking at you're not looking around, taking in your environment, your blind spot, you're just assuming things are going to work out, then you might find out that's not the case. And so now I feel responsibility to my parents who helped me out a lot when I was struggling, and my wife, because I'm responsible for her and for the people around me. And somewhat to myself, it's important to make sure that I'm able to contribute more than I take. So, there was a while there where I was taking more than I contributed. So
Why is that important to you? This desire to contribute more than you take.
I think it's a admirable quality of my parents. They were,
Mhm.
they're pretty responsible, and they've kind of, they're the type that would, if a family member died, they're the executors on the will, and they're helping out younger family members and stuff like that. So, I think it's like a good, um, like moral value that I picked up. But yeah, it's just I don't want to fail those around me, and I just take it really seriously.
Mm, okay. Again, I feel very good about you being Delta Quadra. I feel like that's really shining out. This desire to kind of do your part, contribute, be useful. There's a certain humility that's there with you as well. It's very Delta. Um, I'm seeing NE. I'm seeing an appreciation for SI, for certain comfort and stability on things. Um, you also have a certain T where you want to get good at stuff. You want to actually learn and know what you're doing and make sure you're doing a good job and figuring it out. But sounds to me like that's an area that is a little bit more of concern for you. You don't feel as confident in that area. Same goes for managing things on the day-to-day stuff, making sure everything is taken care of. It's a place of stress, it seems like. So to me, it sounds like a Delta and a Delta NF. And I'm leaning more towards EII at the moment. I'm sorry, IEE. Keep thinking EI, which is the ENFP. Now, the LSC ESTJ was the other one that I still kind of have like floating around in my head as a possibility. But given that you seem like you have more of the imposter syndrome and concern over the day-to-day practical stuff, I don't think an LSC would really be that concerned with that kind of stuff. They'd probably do well in that. If anything, you're kind of describing your wife as possibly being an LSE or an SLI, something like that. She seems to be quite good at the day-to-day stuff, taking care of business and things and just hacking away at that. You seem to appreciate and admire that from her.
She's much more emotionally expressive.
Okay.
Um, I even thought she might be an ESC,
Okay.
but she's. I think that she has high SI, and I don't know with the FE and FI. I assume she's some sort of um, extroverted feeling type, one of those four types. But she kind of wants what she wants. It does, like kind of Enneagram type 2. If things don't go right, but she's willing to kind of cater to everyone else. So and that's partly due to probably largely due to her childhood, where she was kind of the I guess the light in her family. Like she had to be kind of
Okay.
I don't know how to word it, but maybe you understand. You understand an Enneagram type
Yeah.
2.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Again, I feel like Delta. I feel very comfortable ruling out Beta and Gamma. If that's not it, you're not part of those two quadrants. Alpha is a maybe, but you seem to be more appreciative of the practical, getting things done kind of approach, like learning stuff, rather than the theoretical stuff that, say, an LII might be interested in.
I
Also,
mean,
the idea of an LII doing wrestling and soccer and everything else is also kind of weird.
yeah. Um, I think Yes, I think NE and SI are correct.
Hmm.
Probably and that's something I've talked about a lot, but I tend to err more on the, or I've thought about a lot, but I tend to err more on the side of NE SI. Um, and I thought that I suspected that alpha quadrant might be more likely, um, just because of how, I guess, like, analytical I can be and how detached I can be. But I can see how my values probably align more with delta.
Yeah, I mean that's where I'm at the moment. Um, it doesn't completely rule out certain things. It doesn't completely rule out like an ILE or an LII from alpha, but something I also noticed is like a lot with your responses too. Like you're it's very difficult for you to give a very exacting, definitive response on something. You're very much like, well, there's this, and then there's that. I do this thing, but then I also do that thing, but then there's this, but then there's this, and there's that, and then there's that, and then there's that. Which is why it was kind of going a little bit all over the place for a while there. That's more suggestive of lower TI or a lack of TI,
Oh,
right? So if there's no TI, then now we're in delta quadrant territory, especially if we're dealing with an IEE, which is TI polar. They resist those definitive, this is it kind of rules. They resist using a structure and a framework and saying that's the framework and that's what I'm going to do.
well,
Right.
so the way I see it too is, like, in the military, there's a lot of like definitive frameworks,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot that's up to, you have to kind of figure out something you're going to work with and roll out with it.
Yep.
Um,
Kind of
but
alarm over here. Give it a second. Yeah, I know. It's okay. There we go.
all right, so I can get kind of frustrated with people if you set some sort of definitive way that we're going to do. Okay, so everyone's agreeing, like, very um, inclusive. I want to include people's input. A lot of times I ask people's input, but they just kind of want to be, I guess, like, bossed around or told what to do. They don't want to have to think about it. But
Mm-hmm.
I want everyone's input. Like, are we going to do this? And then they kind of like, oh, okay, that's fine. And then I try and hold people to it, and then they try and slip out. They don't really want to do it and it's stuff. And it's like, you guys agreed to this. And so I can find it very frustrating when there is no system in place. So you put a system in place and then all of a sudden people don't want to do it. Like, I'm all for fitting the system to people.
Mm-hmm.
But then when people don't try and fit the system that you fit to them, it's like, come on, man. I don't know. I can get really frustrated because it's complicated, and it's like, okay, what are we doing now? Like, where do I go? What am I doing? Um,
Mm-hmm. Um, I mean, it also sounds like you're not big on like really asserting yourself in
no,
there. Now, then again, if it's military, obviously there's a rank structure on there. So depending on the situation, you may feel like, look, it's not my place to lead and organize people and so on. Like that's up to the chief or whomever to kind of do that. So
but if nobody's doing it, I tend to do it. I don't like bossing people around. I don't care about being seen, but I care about things occurring, um, like, kind of well, or um, like, if, like, I see there's a hole and nobody's stepping into it, I'm willing to kind of step into it, but it's kind of more like I'm looking around to see if anybody else will do it, and then if nobody does, I do it.
okay. So see earlier I didn't get the sense that the FI stuff, the ability to really sort of tell the character of other people, tell what those people are all about, how you feel about those people, and then with that kind of gauge where you stand with them. I didn't get a sense that that was terrible for you or that that's really bad. Doesn't seem like a real blind spot to me. Would you agree?
Um, uh, I think so. A lot of times I might seek validation. Like, I'll pick my wife's brain. Like, this happened. Do you think that it could be like this? and then I can get a little bit more perspective. I don't feel comfortable making those determinations sometimes all on my own, but
Hmm.
um, but yeah, it's not like usually my inclination tends to be correct, but sometimes I do just judge people wrong off the bat, and then I have to kind of uh, update my my model of that person.
Yeah, but it's not like a surprising shock or anything to you, right? It's not something where you went, wow, I'm consistently really bad at figuring out what people are like, especially emotionally.
I think if I get too close to somebody, that could be true. But if I can remain a little bit more detached, then I can get pretty good at that.
Okay. I mean, it still just doesn't, that just doesn't ring as a like a blind spot to me, which sort of rules out the ILE. So usually your ILEs, the ENTPs, that's their blind spot, FI. So a lot of times with them, you can see them like really struggle even to give voice to what they think of someone, especially in the more extreme. So you might even ask an ILE sometimes, like, what do you think of Pepito over here? And and they're just like, well, he's okay. Do you like him? Do you not like him? And they're just like, I don't know. It's like they really have a hard time finding a reason to have any kind of personal opinion on someone. You don't seem to have that kind of struggle at all.
No, and there's certain character traits that I look for, and so it's not like this person's good or bad. It's I like this about this person. I don't like this. I don't
Mm-hmm.
like that they said this thing. And then I find reasons like, oh, maybe they're young. They need to figure it out or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So again, that doesn't sound polar to me. But again, what I haven't really heard much is anything really in the TI arena. Again, those structure, those rules, like that to me seems to be more the challenging spot. And maybe it's part of the reason, again, why when it comes to socionics, you're sort of like looking at this, you're looking at that, because socionics is extremely TI heavy. It's all rules. It's all this structure is based on this structure, and it's all theories stacked on top of theories, right? That just makes logical structure, but it's kind of it. For types that don't like that or very uncomfortable with that or polar, they may have a very hard time with it. I think types with NE also are going to have some struggle because they're the ones who are like, well, what about this? What about that? Are we sure about this though? Did we check that other thing over there? Uh, and this is where they really start to kind of bounce around a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense. It just seems like I can't, like I could make a decision like, okay, I've looked at it, I've crossed everything off, and I must be an LII. And then I go to sleep and I wake up in the morning and I think something else and I have to reanalyze everything. And it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like it's like Sisyphus pushing I think it's Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill. It just like I do it and then I wake up and then it's like at the bottom of the hill. Or like I'll be in the middle of the day and I'll have some sort of question, or I'll say something to somebody and I'll interact in a way where it makes me totally question it. So I can't really build any um, constant like reassurance in myself. There's no confidence in any determination really. So
Yeah, yeah. So that's why, to me, that could be the TI polar there, especially jumping so quickly, as you're saying. You feel good one night, you go to sleep, you wake up the next day, and it's like, oh shit, now I could be something else altogether. I mean, it's such a short period of time to be questioning something without necessarily having some substantial piece of evidence to prove otherwise, right? So some other types, people who have very high TI, for example, a lot of times for them, they'll be very definitive and say, no, this is the thing. And to get me to change my mind on that, you're going to have to show me some kind of like really good evidence, something really, really solid to get me to kind of like suddenly look in another direction. See, Here, you're having a very easy time at coming up with different possibilities or different ways of looking at it, or what about this, what about that. Whereas you're having a very hard time staying decided on this is what the rule is and that's what it's going to be. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I would say also I have a pretty big fear of like acting as if operating on information as if I'm correct, or really believing that I'm correct and I'm not. And so I think as a byproduct, it's very easy for me to disrupt the foundation of my knowledge base,
Mhm.
and very hard to solidify it, which definitely I think has its benefits, but it also has, you know, its detriments. And I think it's probably why I've been, you know, kind of spinning my wheels for a few years trying to
Yeah.
figure this out.
I mean, that comment there also sounds a little bit like a possible not TI, TE mobilized, where you're good with it or you feel pretty good with it, but then there's these moments, these lack of confidence. Right? Usually a mobilized position is that area that we can sometimes grow in it and then feel like we're good at it and then question ourselves, or we realize we screwed up, we're not as good at it as we thought we were. And it leads us into a bit of despair, a bit of really deeply reevaluating, oh man, am I really this good? Am I not this good? Shit, maybe I suck. Maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was. Maybe I really don't know anything. That's more likely for somebody, again, lower with TE, but even a TE in a mobilized position. So for socionics, like if we're talking IEE, you would have NE on top as the dominant, with TE as a mobilized position. So those two things would be popping out the most. They'd be pushed, as we would
Mhm.
call it. Right? They're bold. They would show up. People could see it. You're doing it a lot. But the one thing that's always consistent is more the NE. And it's the area that you should be more confident in, that you don't really suffer a lack of confidence in, right? Whereas in a mobilized position, it's something you can suffer a lack of confidence. You can take a hit there and then realize, oh man, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was.
Hmm.
Right? Does that make sense? Did I go all over the place there?
No, no, it makes sense. And I do think I'm pretty confident at, like, you know, coming up with new ideas. Like, I'm not, I guess, the most artistic. I tend to be quite articulate. Like, I really focus on articulation over like artistry. Like, I want to people to understand what I'm saying, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
clearly understand what they're saying. So I in that I still have no problem, because the reason I bring that up is because creative types are quite good at, like, reinterpreting things, finding different definitions for things. I don't have a lot of difficulty in trying to understand the different ways that something could make sense.
Right.
So it's everything kind of makes sense to me. It just, if everything makes sense to me, then nothing makes sense to me.
Right. And that's where, yeah, again, that's where, again, for very TI-ish people, they can be very exacting on, look, the word is this, that's the meaning. That's it. Or this is what we're referring to with that, that's it. That's the meaning. They're providing structure. They're providing definitive, decisive um, framework of looking at something, and that's it. Right. To people with more NE, they can look at that and it's like, well, you're not being open-minded enough. What about this? What about that? There's another way to look at it. Right. This is where it can lead to certain clashes. So if we looked at like conflicted relationships, for example, right, we might have an LSI, the ISTP that leads with TI, and they're usually supposed to conflict with an IEE, because the LSI is like, this is it. This is the way we do it. It's done deal. There's no need to look at other stuff. They're anypolar. They don't want to look at other stuff. IEI, IEE, right? The NFP is kind of voicing, they're going, well, but what about this? What about that? I don't know about this consistency. I don't, and there's a lack of structure there. So they clash. Right?
So depending on who I'm interacting with, the people that can be like very much like, this is the way it is, they could be very annoying or intimidating, because it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, how do I break through to this person that I'm not just like, you know, try to be difficult. I get that a lot. Like, I'm just trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to be contrarian. A lot of times they're just trying to understand. Um, and um, they're going to operate off this principle. And so like I'm also vigilant of people in life that are kind of like that, because like if they say this, then that's their word, and that's what they're going to be held to. That's what they're going to hold me to as well. So I'm kind of, I guess like vigilant of those types.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, that makes sense. Um, yeah, and that's really how it probably would manifest, right? It's just somebody who, if they're very TI, very structured, this is the way it is. They're very consistent on that, and they're not really interested in looking for alternative approaches. So if someone's coming around asking a lot of questions or poking at it or messing with that structure, with that routine, that organization, they're just going to look at you like, listen, we've already established the way it is. Why are you continuously bothering to pester us about this? Like, just what are you doing? Are you just trying to be annoying or something? Like what? You know?
Yeah, and a lot of times, like depending on the premise, it could lead to downstream consequences. So, like I think it's really important to question like the premises of the problem initially, like our underlying assumptions about any problem. And
Mm-hmm.
so those types tend to not do that too much, um, and that's the thing that I'm constantly trying to bring them to. And I think everybody has some form of social utility, and so I tend to think that that's kind of mine, is to get people to question what it is that they're doing, why they're doing it. Because I'm doing that constantly for myself, so that it's very natural for me to do that for other people. And a lot of I think people have different threshold levels of their ability to deal with um, what's this like lack of confidence in information, or certainty. A lot of people are really poor at handling uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I tend to be better at that. I can handle a higher load of uncertainty. And when I ask people questions, and I never understood as a kid, like why when you ask adults questions, sometimes they get mad at you. It's because they were certain, and then you've created some sort of like cognitive strain on them by bringing them into a place of uncertainty. Questions
Yeah.
can do that. So by asking a lot of questions, I tend to make people very uncertain of themselves. So
Yes.
I didn't realize that I was like doing some sort of like cognitive damage, so to speak. But I think it's important to do damage. You go to the gym to build your muscles, but that requires incurring damage. If you want to build your mind, you have to damage it too. And so going to and if you're certain about the wrong thing, there's a problem. The cure is uncertainty, asking questions.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think you just hit the nail on the head there. For very certain types, they really value that certainty, that need for it. It's so natural to them. This is the way things are. That's the way it is. And you're coming in there, as you said, unraveling that certainty, and it makes them feel uncomfortable. You're coming in there like some chaos monkey that's just bringing this into them, and they're just like, wait, what? Now I have to rethink the universe and so on. Like, what? That reality is not what I always thought it was. Like, get the hell away from me. Stop messing with my reality, right? So yeah, I think that's exactly kind of what's going on there. Um, and it's noticeable that again you're still advocating for that uncertainty, that we do need to reevaluate stuff, we do need to look at it from different ways. Well, how can you be certain? How do you know, right? Are you sure? Did you look at everything? You're still advocating for that very much sounds like any, again, to me, just bouncing around looking at different things.
And I can have a lot of respect for people that they understand the difference between subjectivity and objectivity, and they go, but this is let's say that's my truth. It is like one way they might phrase it. As long
Mm-hmm.
as they're acknowledging it's not the truth. um, there's a lot of people out there that don't acknowledge that, and they go, this is the way it is.
Yep.
And it's like they fail to see that we're all subjective organisms. All of our conclusions are subjective, and they might align with some sort of external objective, but it's not in and of itself
Mm,
objective. And so it's important to consider that subjective quality that we all possess.
yep. Which again, you're as you said, you're denying a singular truth. You're denying that there's one way to do it, or one way to look at it, or one way of being. And instead, you're upholding that there's different truths for everybody. There's different ways of looking at it for anybody. And no one's approach is better or worse than anybody else's. It's just that individual's point of view. Very Delta, very eliminating of TI. You're really pushing TI out of the way completely. I'm sure that right now, I mean, you could probably get some various people that really care about TI that have it in just the first or the mobilized position, and they would probably debate the crap out of you right now. They'd be arguing with you on some philosophical thing on like what is truth, and like this is the reality that exists for everybody, and a battle would break out. You know, an intellectual war would happen.
And yes, and also people don't tend to consider that like words are we're interpreting them. So like you might apply some sort of internal definition, then I apply it, and then also related to the context. So if like I'm talking to somebody and we both say truth, but we mean something else, it's a very pointless discussion. So it's really important first to define things. And I'm constantly trying to get people to define things. What do you mean by this word? When you say this, you know, do you mean this? Because then we're just talking past one another. And so a lot of people, they assume that there's this objective quality about language, but the way that we interact as humans, there's really not. There's like, if there's, you can kind of imply that they kind of mean this, but your implication could be wrong. And then now there's just miscommunication. So like, it's really important to define words, especially words like truth, subjective, objective. So I'm constantly not only asking people what they mean, I'm constantly telling people exactly what I mean, so that there's less misinterpretation.
Yeah. Again, I'm hearing I can't. I don't know why I'm all like retarded with this today. Like
A lot of ease.
Yeah, the ENFP. Damn it. So one of the challenges I find with this is a type that is, in my opinion, not well understood. It's one of several. In fact, this is one of those types that I think is one of my pet projects lately within the socionics world, because I don't feel like it's well described and written about. And part of that's also not socionics. Part of that's just because when you come out of like MBTI and some of those other systems, there is this idea that like ENFPs are going to be the manic pixie dream girl chick with purple hair who believes in wokeism and 17 genders, you know, and like just there's that kind of stereotype. And so we kind of have to resist thinking of it in that way. To include this idea that they're not going to be intellectual, they're not necessarily going to be interested in sciencey stuff or appearing like somebody who wants to analyze things. Right. So it's one of a few types that I just feel like it needs a bit of work in. I mean, for example, the idea of an ENFP in the military is probably weird to some people. Right there, they're just like, what? Why would they do that? And a male, we tend to think of ENFPs also as female for some reason. It's just the way that the thing is written. It denotes some kind of like you're talking about a woman. So when it's male, it becomes a little more difficult to relate to it. But anyway, yeah, that's a pet project thing I'm kind of dealing with. But right now, that's kind of the type I think that's standing out to me is the IEE, the ENFP in Socionics for Delta Quadra. Now I'm not definitive on that. I think a little more time is needed to kind of discuss further and look into it further. I think you need to kind of like read up on it a little bit and see what you think. Delta overall as a whole, I feel very confident in on that. And if it's not going to be the ENFP, then it might be the ESTJ as a backup. But I even look into, all of them. all the deltas. I don't think SLI works for you. That doesn't quite seem right. You seem a lot more a lot more outgoing than the SLI usually is. So yeah, there's that. As far as like reading material, Wikisocion is kind of like the encyclopedia that everybody uses, of course. The downside of Wikisocion is that it is one, overwhelming because it has an enormous amount of stuff in there. There's so many authors and so many writers and so much stuff. It's like, whose opinion am I following? Whose stuff am I looking at? So that can be a little bit of a problem. The second thing is that in Wikisocion, by design, they brought in just about anyone and everyone within the socionics world and dumped their stuff in there. So even if it's stuff that is kind of wacky and weird and not very credible, it didn't matter. They put it in there anyway, just to have an open, just a completely open forum to anything that's ever been done in like socionics, right? That adds to the overwhelming nature of it, because then you're looking at stuff too that's just weird, like visual typing stuff and you know, descriptions of like this type needs to be chubby and round faced with weird eye, you know, like they get into weird shit like that. Some schools do that, right? But it just adds to the overwhelming amount of information and like trying to figure out what's real and what's not. Right? You were going to say something.
Yeah, I tend to read. It's always the third link. Like I can't say her name. Like Strat something.
Yeah.
Stratovskaya or something.
Yes. Yeah, you're close. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I read hers, and then I read sometimes I'll read the subtypes. I mean, I read a lot of them, but like that's the one that I tend to I like. Mm-hmm. The definitions seem to be the most clear to me, and then I like reading about the cognition styles. But I've also seen your videos where you talk about the Renin dichotomies, which and the cognition styles by proxy would be based on that, aren't super reliable. So that's led me to reconsider using those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can't say her name right now. I know exactly what you're talking about. I read through her. I kind of like her stuff too. The Renin dichotomies and all that, it gets very tricky. It's the biggest issue there is that it's a very advanced area. It's very theoretical. So there's very few people that are truly comfortable using that to really differentiate and type. It's really not a good place unless you're like a true socionics nerd and you have been playing at this for a long time. So you kind of really figured out what those dichotomies are trying to get at. Some of them are just poorly written. Like the wording is not good. It doesn't come over well. Examples, of course, like the classic ones like tactical versus strategic. That doesn't play over well. It's listing certain types as being very strategic that are never described as strategic. Like an ESFP is supposedly strategic. ESTP is supposedly strategic. And you're like, really? Like, no, they're not. It's highly impulsive types. Like, it just, so there's a lot of issues in there, is my point. Aristocratic versus democratic, stuff like that, to define the different quadrants. Like, it's a bit of a messy area. I prefer to look at certain little basic things. So starting out stuff with like clubs, NT, SF, NF, ST, trying to figure out which one of those makes more sense. Right. It's very basic stuff. Quadras, the quadra values. Which quadra do you fit in? The alpha quadra, beta, gamma, delta, which quadra seems to be more in line with the values that you really have and the way you really overall are approaching things. Right. I'm missing something. Temperament can also help. So temperament also has in the MBTI world, it's usually when they would talk about like EP, EJ, IJs, IPs, if you're familiar with that. That's sort of kind of the same thing that is in socionics. EJs have a certain temperament, EPs have a certain temperament, so on. So by kind of figuring out which temperament here, which club over there, which quadra here, that's another way of kind of narrowing things down, right? That's one approach.
The one that I forget the name of it that seems like plausible to me is is like some of them were like humanitarian, artistic, scientific researching, it had those kind of names, and then it was based off of the function stack, uh, like what their shift is, like club shift, I think. And so, like for IEE, it was humanitarian artistic is what they display, but then there's a shift towards social communicative, I think. And so that one seemed to make a little bit more sense to me. But some of the other ones, like you're talking with the Renin dichotomies, also didn't make a lot of sense because it just seemed like they were kind of assigned because there was a slot to fill.
And that's where some of the stuff gets kind of messy and weird, because we're now getting into a place where it's theory stacked on top of theory, stacked on top of theory. And it doesn't always hold up well in the real world, right? Take, for example, like you mentioned, humanitarian and so on, right? Okay, sure. Does that mean that every NF you encounter has to be only interested in humanitarian things? Like they're only going to be working a soup kitchen or trying to do some philosophical work, feed the starving children of Africa? Like that's it? Like if they're interested in biology, for example, that you can't be an NF? See, that's those kind of like little areas where sometimes the way it's written makes it seem so strict and absolute that it just doesn't play out well in the real world. Right? There's a lot of these dichotomies and so on that get more and more advanced that start to get really tricky like that. You know, and for the average person, it's like this is not helpful. It's not working. I don't know what that means. In fact, I would generally say that there's probably, I feel like a handful of people on the face of the earth that could fully map out all the Renin dichotomies properly. It just gets that wacky.
So how did you get into socionics?
Like a lot of people, I bounced around from different systems and eventually just kind of looked around and noticed that like socionic stuff was popping up. So if you were looking at some MBTI channel or some other thing and somebody's talking about your polar function, they're like, oh, this person is FI polar or this and that. And you start thinking, what the hell is this polar? What are you talking about? Where's this coming from? It's like, well, that's socionics. Somebody might do discussions on inner type relations. This type relates here to that because of this and that. You're like, well, where is this coming from? Socionics. And I kept hearing that, and eventually I'm like, okay, what the hell is socionics? And started diving into it. Now, I prefer listening to certain individuals that I find much more, they're more knowledgeable and they've been around a long time and they're good at explaining stuff. Okay, they're good at breaking it down better. Some people like to just read about stuff and they want to go dive into like Wikisocion or dive into those things, and they just kind of read and suss things out on their own, deciding for themselves what is best and what's not. Some people just want to sit alone for long periods of time and intellectually, logically deduce for themselves what makes sense and what doesn't. And then there's some people who like to just rely on other people who are actually really good at what they're doing and are good at communicating. I would say I actually am probably a little bit of the last two, and I really like listening to certain people. So it's kind of the reason I even started my channel, because I thought I could reach certain people, a certain demographic of people would just respond to what I was saying, and it would help clarify things for them. It would help make certain things click and whatnot. In the past, I've been very good at that when it comes to teaching, very good at breaking down complicated crap in a way that people felt like it made sense and was easy now. I would do that really with a lot of science stuff. I used to teach a lot in biology and anatomy and physiology, and especially on the medical side. as an undergrad, I was doing biotechnology for a while there. So breaking a lot of that shit down and just giving it simple, like this is what you need to study, that's how you do it, like this is whatever, has always kind of been a strength of mine. So I felt with Socionics, I could do the same thing, as well as just interact with other people who are into Socionics, and just through talking to people and sharing ideas, we would just smarten up. We'd learn things that work and don't work. So other people who have really good material, there's Jack from World Socionic Society. Probably out there on like YouTube stuff, he's probably got the absolute best stuff. Very clear, concise, and he's been doing it for so damn long. So that's another person that's like a resource to look at. There's a few other individuals that are good, that are sometimes a little more obscure and hard to find. LIIs, it's one of the things like drives me crazy about LIIs. They're not very good at getting into the public space and interacting. So they tend to be the types that have these blogs hidden somewhere, you know, on the internet, and you have to just go find them. You have to dig that shit up. Amusingly, actually, the guy who probably gets the most credit for bringing Socionics over to the West and making it popular here in the English-speaking world is a guy named Rick DeLong, who was an ENFP. And he actually has a little blog buried in there somewhere on the internet as well that goes way back. So anyway, I mean, I guess I kind of got carried away there, but that's basically my train on Socionics.
Yeah, I would say that your style is helpful because of, you know, everything we discussed with how I kind of tend to flounder around with, you know, perspectives and you know, all the different ways things can make sense, and you didn't do that. And so also you don't tend to like animate too much, so your information is coming out just really clear. So you're not like very like facially or tonally expressive. Like it doesn't feel like you're trying to like sell me a product. You're just talking about something that you know about. And I really was drawn to that as well because I wanted to learn about it. So you were just kind of talking about it.
Which I appreciate that, and that's exactly the intent. Sometimes I actually worry that maybe, you know, it's not coming across quite so exciting. You know, I could ad lib more and just make some funny, you know, just whatever tough comments about stuff, and I kind of deliberately suppress a little bit of that because I'm trying to be more objective about it, and that's on purpose. That's because I want whoever's watching this to learn. This is to share information, to learn, and to make it clear. So I deliberately maybe suppress a little bit of like you know, some personal opinions I like to throw around on stuff, you know. And yeah, I'm not here to sell a product. It's not a product. It's not my information. This is just Socionics. It's just helpful to people, and it's just fun to talk about it. So I don't care about the number of subscribers or whatever the hell else. It's not important.
I think it makes a good resource, and I think because you already have a career, you're not trying to, you know, it doesn't seem like you're trying to angle this for something bigger. It allows you to kind of have a little bit more detached from the outcome, and it allows you to be a little bit more objective as a result of that.
Yeah, and it allows for, you know, for someone like you or anybody else who's like, oh, I don't know, you know, let's talk about this, whatever, you know, you don't feel like this is product placement. This person's trying to sell me a program. This person's trying to hook me in on something. It's like, no, it's just learning about oneself, having a conversation. See, even right now, I'm learning something too. I'm learning about the typing process. How can I continue to refine it? If I'm right and you're an IEE, I'm getting a new view of what an IEE looks like. I'm getting a different take on it. And one from a male and military. It's a little bit different. Right? It's quite different from the manic pixie dream girl with purple hair kind of thing. right? So you're getting a chance to expand your mind a little bit on how these different types can manifest, and that's interesting, to me. So yeah, I'm not here to really sell anything. I also have been moving in the direction of kind of paying a little more attention to um, areas that I think are really forgotten about in socionics. I think there's a bit of a void there, such as delta quadra in particular, um, but gamma quadra to an extent as well. I think those are two quadras that just kind of get left behind, partly because deltas are just last. Everyone always starts in that order of alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and then deltas are just like, oh, whatever, this afterthought. Um, deltas can be seen as not terribly exciting. Deltas are a group of people that sometimes seem to be less present online in this whatever different spheres out there. They're not the type that are always blowing up your comment section and making a lot of channels and stuff. They just tend to be a little bit more quiet, or they're just not interested that much anyway.
Would you suspect that they're more likely to be lurkers? Like they're less
Yes.
likely to get into that competitive aspect of
Yes.
commenting and arguing with people?
Yep, absolutely. They're probably out of the four quadrants, delta overall as a whole, all four of them are probably the least likely to really want to get too involved, either because they're not that interested. They're just like, yeah, whatever. Or they see no point in like arguing and battling with stuff. They'll just listen to someone's opinion. Okay, that's what so-and-so said on his channel, whatever, big deal. I'm not going to make an issue out of that. That's just his opinion. I'm going to move on, right? There's other types and in other quadrants that are notorious for just like blowing up and fighting with people constantly, one way or another, right? They're your NTs out of alpha, ILEs especially, will love to troll or mess with people or argue and debate. That's why they're often known as the debaters sometimes, as a nickname for them. Your INTPs, the LIIs, are types that can make a lot of comments and post on like this from this research and that and whatever, and they like to get into that kind of stuff. Betas like to fight with everybody because they always want to correct the record. No, you're looking at it wrong. It's like this, right? SLEs can be very argumentative and love to jump in there, sometimes just to troll, or because they genuinely think that you did something wrong. IEIs, LSIs are going to argue that you have it wrong. You didn't read this. You need to know that. They're much more likely to fight and engage. Gammas, if they choose, may argue and get involved, but gammas are certainly much more, can be more aggressive, more competitive, and can take things more personally. So they are more likely to either argue or just leave comments like, you suck, you got this all wrong, go fuck yourself. Like they. So deltas overall are they're the most, again, non-combative of all of them. This is why they're the humanitarian quadra. They're the humility quadra. They're the more open-minded, that people can have different perspectives. People can look at it different ways, as you were saying earlier. That's that guy's opinion. That's fine. I don't need to fight with him. He just has an opinion. Everyone's allowed to have their own views on stuff. Why do I need to correct the record? How do I know that my opinion is the opinion? So why should I tell you that?
So where I was saying like maybe I'm more I'm less susceptible to uncertainty. Like it doesn't bother me as much. What I'm very susceptible to is like just that feeling of being an idiot. Like you say, this is the way it is, this is right, and then you were wrong about it, and that happens to everyone. Like we're going to be wrong about things. Like none of us are omniscient. It just that's such a jarring feeling. So like for me, like I don't want to do that, but then I don't want to project myself onto other people. They're different. Maybe it doesn't bother them as much, but I wonder if they ever feel like, how dumb must they feel sometimes just to hold on to something, and it could just be totally wrong. Like I think it's important to and maybe it makes you sound less certain. People are less willing to listen, but to kind of imbue a little bit of doubt into your own statements, it's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's like an avoidance of that experience of, there's always some plausible deniability. What I'm saying could just be full of
Yeah.
shit, could be wrong.
The thing is that every type, for example, will address imposter syndrome or address certainty being wrong. They'll address it differently, and it will depend a lot on the stack where all the elements kind of fall. So a lot of your let's see, a lot of different types, for example, that have things in the ego stack up high, they don't get as hurt about being wrong. They're much more willing, more bold at just diving into an intellectual conversation or some area and just saying, look, this is the way I see it, this is what it is, this is what makes sense, da, 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 da. And if they're wrong, they're like, okay, show me I'm wrong. Okay, you're right, you know what, I was wrong, no problem. And they just take it easily and just go right to bed. It's not really gonna bother them that much. It might feel a little bad that you're like, oh shit, okay, well, I just look stupid, all right, whatever. But it's not that distressing to them. Right now, there's other types that will find it really distressing, very uncomfortable to be wrong and to be proven to be wrong. They'll really feel like it's a real like a blow to their self-esteem, almost like, damn, like I can't believe I just looked really stupid in front of all these people. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Do I ever really know what I'm talking about? Oh, I don't know. Oof. you know Now, some types, especially, let's say if you have it in the mobilized position, all right? So let me back up for one step there. So the dominant position and the mobilized position in socionics are two very bold positions, meaning that they stand out to people. You're pushing it out there onto the world, and people can see you doing that, right? They're also two very stubborn positions. So it's something that we feel like we can do for ourselves, that we want to do for ourselves. We can push it out there. We're right about it. We can do it. And so we really resist not doing it or anyone else doing it for us. Now, there we go. Now, with the mobilized, because it's a little bit weaker, it is an area where we can feel a bit of an inferiority complex, or a little bit of like, I thought I had it and I don't, and I just screwed up. Now I look like a moron. Now I feel bad about myself. It's an area where there's more, I guess, self-esteem or issues. That's a good way of putting it. We can feel great when we're doing well with it, and then when we're not, we can feel really bad with it. We are much more volatile in that particular area. Right? This is why, to me, like when you're talking about having a lot of the imposter syndrome and not sure about this, or being a little bit nervous about being wrong, that strikes me more as probably having like TE or something in a mobilized position, right, or lower. People who might have TE like all the way at the bottom, suggestive, they might avoid getting into intellectual conversations altogether if they're not really comfortable that they know what they're talking about. Right? This is my wheelhouse, so I know I can talk about it. As soon as it starts to deviate from their wheelhouse, they're just like, you know what? I'm just going to totally hang back. I'm not really going to say much of anything because I'm very concerned that I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I'd rather let other people who do know what they're talking about do it. Right? Really, all the types that have like thinking in the suggestive, or in MBTI, I would say the inferior position, would often just like, I'm not getting into different intellectual areas that I don't really know what I'm talking about, that I've been doing it for a long time. ILEs, ENTPs don't give a shit. They'll talk about anything. ENTJs a lot, they'll talk about anything. They maybe have never done it a day in their life, but they just feel this confidence that they know enough that they can dive into an intellectual conversation about just about anything.
So if it's not a competitive environment, or like, people are trying to win, be more right, like people are just willing to learn with you, I'm kind of willing to just do that too. Just kind of talk about anything. But I would tend to shut down a little bit if people are, a little less forgiving in that capacity. Then it's like, I don't really want to talk with you. Like you're trying to like win when I'm not compete. Like if somebody's trying to beat you at a game that you're not playing, it's a huge turnoff.
Right. Which also sounds like one, the competitiveness, the SE components that we say, like you're not really all that interested in that. You don't really want to deal with that very much. Um, and again, the lack of certainty of I don't really fully know my stuff well enough. I'm not comfortable that I know my stuff well enough to engage in some kind of a potentially confrontational intellectual discussion. So you're kind of shying away from that. Um, Again, suggests to me that the thinking portion of it is a bit lower.
Yeah, and I think like if we're talking about anything, like there's always context. I don't really believe that there's any context independent truths. There's like all truths are context dependent. You just have to see the context. So like people will make these statements like very categorically, and I think it's very important to say like within this context, this is how I see it. In this context, there's another context. You could look at it this way.
You're
Um,
rejecting TI. That right there, you're like, no, it's context. It's all about the situation, the circumstances, who, where, what's going on. Everything is about the situation and the context of it. You can't make a universal blanket rule about something.
yeah.
So that statement in of itself is like, right, you're nailing it right on the head. Like TI stuff is like, no, get out of the way.
This has been really illuminating for me because, like, maybe coming over from MBTI, but my definition about TI must have been completely wrong because I thought I was a TI valuing type.
Yeah, they're different in socionics. It's not the same thing. Like I believe like in MBTI, TI is like this subjective thinking. I'm thinking for myself, and I'm coming up with my own analysis of something, type of thing. And then TE is this like tough. I'm going out there pushing on people my frameworks on things and whatever. That's not really how it's viewed in socionics at all. Um, Thinking is not pushy in socionics. Thinking is not, you're just thinking. It's just how do you try to approach and problem solve things, and where do you derive information from, and what do you value more? Do you value a nice, clear cut structure? Everything logically flows from one thing to the next without any contradictions? Or are you looking more at what works, what's useful, what's practical? How does it work? What is the technique that makes it work? And as long as it can work, even if it's a contradiction or even if it's not systematically perfect, I don't care. It's working. Right? That's more TE. It's just how a person is gathering information and what are they focused on thinking about stuff. It's not pushing things. Right? The pushing stuff is more of the SE environment, where you're forcing things onto the environment or onto other people. When you put SE, that pushy forcefulness, this is how it is, I because I say so kind of attitude, and you combine that with TI, which is more that structured, this is how everything fits and the way it's going to be, and we're going to stick to it. When you put them together, now you have more of that military style of these are all the rules, this is where all the structure is, this is how you're going to wear everything, this is where your insignia goes, this is how you stand there and salute, this is what time everything happens, and everything is the same, and we're going to enforce that.
So
If you don't follow, you get punished. There will be consequences, real tangible consequences, right?
so the way I think about it too is kind of funny. Like it's like within the context of like us living our lives, being somebody that's in the military, this is all relevant. But in a way, it's kind of like we're kind of and we understand the information that allows us to do all the military stuff. But in a way, we're kind of playing make believe. We're kind of playing dress up. But that's what everyone's doing. Somebody who's doing HVAC, he's kind of doing make believe too. Like, if we're born 1,000 years ago and like maybe a few thousand years ago, we were in a tribe. that's what we would have thought was relevant. So it's only by the context, like the that we were born as we were and we live the lives that we live, that everything we think is relevant. And so, we live among other people, so we have to operate as if it is relevant, like we exist within structures. And if I didn't need to, I could and make money enough to like live comfortably. That would be ideal. But because I live in this world, these are the things I have to treat as relevant, so that I can kind of make it and do right by the people around me, the people that I do care about.
Yeah, and I would. I don't know if I would say I agree with it, but yeah, I guess I do agree with it. Really, it's just that, yeah, depending on which culture and time period you grew up in, every culture of that era has its own views on what's important and what's not, and how society needs to go about doing stuff. This is the time and place in which we happen to be born in and live in. So this is the kind of shit that society does now.
Mhm.
But, did the Romans care about it quite the same way? Did the Amazonians care about it the same way? Um, how did Neolithic man running around in caves and stuff, how did they view the world? Did they see it the way we do with our kind of rules and structure? No. But their world on what mattered to them is just as relevant as what we seem to care matters to us.
Mhm.
It's kind of like when we get into conversations about what is morality, what is the right thing to do in society, how should wars be fought?
Okay. Oh, sorry.
No, that's right. Like how should wars be fought, and what's ethics and what's not?
Mhm.
Especially in historical context. Right now, you can look at Israel and the Palestinians and what's going on there and the fight in there. What is okay? What are the rules of war? What's ethical and what's not ethical? Is there really such a thing as a universal standard on how you conduct warfare and stuff? Does it really apply all the way across the world? It hasn't been done before. Romans used to just kill everybody. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent here, but yeah, it depends on the context in which you're in.
Yeah. I don't think that there is some sort of objective morality. I think that we can determine that, and we have to talk, like, we have to ask, what are we talking about when we mean objective? But like, if you gather 100 people and there's a tribe and they all agree that this is what's right and this is what's wrong, then that's what's right and wrong. It's people that determine it, and we're all going to have our own personal, determinations of morality. So it's what I see is a lot of people that have their own subjective moralities that they're trying to push as the objective. They're all trying to compete. They're trying to compete on a moral landscape, and I'm not immune to doing that myself. Like I get very upset when people do certain things because I view it as like completely inconsiderate, so or improper. It's not like horribly like empathetic. So um, we're that's my view on morality. It's just not there really is an objective morality. I think some people, they might turn towards religion or towards certain philosophers or something, but like this is going to be debated until the end of time, because it's like we're all free to produce our own determinations about what's right and wrong.
Again, it's the subjectiveness, the lack of TI that you're pushing out. In the abstract kind of areas of socionics, like this is kind of where betas and deltas would be battling each other, because betas are the ones that tend to focus on this is the truth, this is the objective universal thing that we should all be working towards. And deltas are probably even more so the types are like, no, they let everybody have their own thing and so on. It's all bullshit anyway. Like, just let everybody have it. Even that example of like the tribe kind of agrees that we all get together, we all agree, it's kind of democratic, we all got together, we all made a conscious decision, this is what we're going to do. Okay. And then we're just going to stick to that. But that also implies that it's very changeable, that at any time we could all get together again and just say, you know what, we're going to change the rules around now. We're going to swap this in. We're going to swap that out. Okay. It's changing. It's not fixed.
It's kind of intimidating too when people kind of get together and they form almost like a swarm. Like a group can almost become like a bunch of grasshoppers. If they get together, they can form locust swarms. And so there's a few species that do that, and I see that like when people form mobs, that can be really scary because like people kind of lose their message. So then it becomes more about, as opposed to independently looking at what could be right and then offering dissent, it's about fitting in with the direction of the mob. And you're always going to have people that break away from that. But if you have, there's no way to move towards peace, in my opinion, by forming these large mobs and then pitting them against each other. It like defeats the purpose from the onset. So it just I tend to caution people to try and think for themselves, and you can support a cause without always like jumping in, because I think a lot of times people jump in way too fast.
Yeah. I wonder how much of that is, socionic sense. I wonder how much of that is also sort of rejecting of FE stuff. Like not getting too caught up in the emotions of things, right? For mobs and mob mentality, a lot, there is something going on that is so emotionally upsetting and bothersome that we have decided to take to the streets and do something about it. We're so pissed off or we're so enraged about something, we're going to go get out there, and then the emotions kind of come together and everybody goes into a feeding frenzy, and madness breaks out after that. So I feel like there's a very FE thing going on. Damn it, here we go with this thing. Oh goodness. Although that kind of is a thing. So kind of going at it there for like 2 hours here. So I think I'm gonna send you some stuff to look at. Again, IEE is kind of what I'm leaning towards the most right now, but it's not set in stone. It can change, which it's kind of frightening to say that because you already mentioned that you change your mind from night to night. So who knows?
It wouldn't be unusual for me. So yeah, I've been previously typed by host Eric.
Okay.
That was via MBTI, and he thought we did 2 videos. So the first time was ENTP, and then the next time was ESTJ or ENTJ. And so it's like this I think, like, I'm going to try, and it's hard for me to compartmentalize information, but I'm going to try and compartmentalize that's in the past with the different systems with Socionics. This is what I'm going to try and put the most weight on. This is the typing I need to consider.
Although, yes, they are 2 different systems, and you're dealing with just 2 individuals, right? There's always the individual component. There's the system, and then there's the human who's typing you, right? But what's interesting to note is you said that Eric typed you ENTP and then ENTJ or ESTJ, something like that.
The videos were a few years apart. So like when I was still, like, one video was prior to meeting my wife, and I was very unstable, and then in life, and so I had like long hair. It was a little more eccentric. And then the most recent video was like, I don't know, maybe 9 months ago or something. I was already in the military, and so, and then I think like people change, so I've continued to kind of mature. So the version of me that you're getting is going to be different than the 2 versions that he got. So
right. Although, at least by like type theory, your type doesn't change, right? What will change though is your outward behavior and your manifestation of it, like what you look like. You said, what was your hair was long before, and now it's not. Now I've been in the military for a while, so obviously that military culture rubs off on you a certain way, right? So kind of the outward external behavior can change and shift a little bit. And as we grow and develop, we will kind of shift a little bit too, and the way we present ourselves. We're going to get better at certain elements and things, right? But anyway, the point I'm getting at is it's interesting that the first time he thought ENTP, which implies that he saw a lot of NE in you, so much NE that he thought you were an NE dominant type. Okay, and I'm also claiming that I see a lot of NE in you because I'm looking at ENFP as a thing, right? So we're both kind of in agreement on that we're seeing a lot of NE. And NE is an element that doesn't change much in the way it's described in MBTI land and how it looks in Socionics. It crosses over pretty well. So that means that he's seeing a lot of that. I'm saying that I also see the TE. I think that that's because you're probably more an ENFP and you have TE in a mobilized position. But even an ENTP in Socionics, if you get into the benefit cycles and so on, which is another little like advanced layer there, they can lean a little bit ESTJ-ish. They can look like it a little bit from time to time, where they look a little bit more pragmatic, more getting things done, more logical, that kind of thing. In Socionics, ENFPs and ESTJs, they're part of the same quadra. They're both pushing out NE and TE. It's their two big, bold, stubborn elements that they're putting out there. So I'm saying that I find it interesting to note that even Eric basically is zeroing in on NE and TE stuff that he's seeing. I'm also seeing that too. So we're kind of in agreement on that. So that's helpful, I think. It shows that there's a certain overlap, there's a certain consistency there of what we're seeing. Again, between the systems, there's different reasonings for stuff. And we already mentioned that TE is not exactly defined the same way in MBTI and it is in Socionics. But it's still noteworthy that we're seeing some of the same stuff. So I think that consistency is helpful. So anyway, yeah, so I'll send over some other stuff that you could look at aside from just Wikisocion to kind of peek at. And then we can re-engage and kind of follow up and see where we're at from there. See if something changed. Or if you just kind of like look at some of the material and read some of the stuff and you just look at it, you're like, this is not right. It's definitely not me.
Okay.
Then we can kind of reassess and go, okay, let's see what happened. What went wrong there?
If you were thinking about, doing another video or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just let me know because I'm about to, in a few days, I need to go pick up some training at another base.
Okay.
And so I'll be like away from my computer and all that, but we could probably figure it out. So
yeah, that's fine. And if not, then we could just do it through like emails or something back and forth and just kind of see where that's at. It's fine.
Okay.
I sometimes just send like recordings of myself because I kind of enjoy just talking this way rather than writing shit out.
Mm-hmm.
So I sometimes just send recordings of myself responding to things and just like, here you go. I sent the recording of myself, answering all these questions and things, whatever. Right. So sound good to you?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Okay, Sam. Good talking to you. Until next time.
All right. See you. Thank you.
You're welcome.